Thank you for joining 3i Communication Ignite More, where we're going to be talking about transforming commercial development into the community development. I am CeCe Baker. I'll be your host for the next hour. Collectively, I have about 18 years of real estate experience. I started in multifamily housing and transitioned into commercial sales, which now I am at Crye-Leike Commercial in their division department. I actually sit on the board at MAR on their community development committee. So today we're going to be having this virtual panel, which this has been like very exciting for me because this is their 1-year anniversary. So I am so excited to be a part of such a thing. They started this panel to like continue to engage in the community and continue to get the word out. So today, what we'll be talking about is different things with the organizations and the community and how we can come together as one. We have some of the best people on this panel today. Like they know so much about real estate and it's an honor to be a part. It's such a great honor. So today I would like to introduce Paul Young, President, CEO of Downtown Commission. Paul, give us a little minute and tell us about yourself.
All right, well, glad to be here today. So as noted, I serve as the President and CEO of Downtown Memphis Commission. And in that role, we work to make sure that we have a downtown for everybody. We do that through incentivizing development. We do different activations and events. Our goal is to make sure that everyone feels like downtown is the living room for not just the city, but for this region. Prior to this role, I served as the Director for Housing and Community Development for the city of Memphis for about 5 years, and just have a deep experience working in this community and a deep love and appreciation for our city, and want to do all that I can to help advance it forward.
Wonderful. Guess who else I have, guys, on this panel? I have the most Memphis native guy ever, Jackson Loeb. Give us a little bit about yourself today, Jackson.
Thank you, CeCe. Happy to be here, everybody. Like CeCe said, my name's Jackson Loeb, from Memphis originally. I went to the University of South Carolina for college. After graduation, I studied finance and real estate at South Carolina. After graduating, moved up to Charlotte, North Carolina, spent 3 years there working for HFF, which was later acquired by JLL, worked on the capital markets side of real estate. So I did debt and equity placement for developments and acquisitions. And then COVID hit last year. I was kind of looking for a change to begin with, and my dad recruited me to come back and join LPI Memphis, kind of navigate our way through COVID. So I've been back in Memphis for about a year now, happy to be back home, and excited to be participating on this panel.
Great. And you know, I cannot leave out the amazing Austin Rowe, realtor. He actually owns his own brokerage, Rowe Realtors. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. Austin, give us a little bit about yourself today.
Hey guys, I've been in real estate for almost 5 years now. I serve on the board of directors of the National LGBTQ plus Real Estate Alliance. I've been born and raised in Memphis. I've spent 13 years in food service and then made the natural segue from food service into real estate. And yeah, that's what I do. And I just recently opened my own brokerage, Rowe Realtors, about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, we officially launched. So it's really exciting. We're downtown and have a lot of good things in the works.
Well, congratulations to you. We're missing Donahue Peebles. He had an emergency today, so he would not be joining us. And let's get started. Let's get right in. As we know, there's a rise in the development. So we understand there's a community level of awareness and involvement that play a huge part in success and failure when we're talking about development. So Paul, here, let me ask you this question. In a response to the current pandemics that have hit our communities and have been felt across the globe, how does your organization step up to the plate?
Yeah, for downtown Memphis, our organization has been really about making sure that we can help stabilize the businesses that are currently located downtown. We've provided emergency relief through some of the federal grant programs. Some of the funding that came from the city was passed down through us. We provided emergency loans to businesses located downtown. As you all know, downtown thrives off people and traffic, and especially during the early stages of the pandemic, all of that was brought to a halt for many months. And so if you think about the small business that is premised upon daytime traffic for lunch, or autos owners that are coming in and buying sandwiches when AutoZone closes its office, and I'm not picking on AutoZone, they weren't the only one. Many organizations closed their offices. Those companies had, those small businesses had a really difficult time. As things have begun to open back up, they're still feeling some of that pain because people are not at full strength in the office. And so our organization is here to try to help facilitate opportunities, bring people downtown, create activations that get people down here to patronize those businesses, which obviously has an impact on the real estate side, because if the vendors and businesses that lease space from the developers aren't able to thrive, then the developer ultimately feels that pain as well.
Okay, good deal, good deal. Now, I know you said something about some of the business having loans. Do you have some of that stuff on your website for the audience to go to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we have a lot of grants and loans. You can go on downtownmemphis.com, exterior improvement grants, retail, interior tenant improvement grants, developer loans, and we also offer tax abatements through pilots.
That's some good stuff. That's some good stuff. Okay, Austin, what have been your biggest hurdle or roadblocks when engaging the local community, and how have you looked to improve them?
From a commercial real estate standpoint, one of the biggest hurdles that I have seen is trust in the local community when you go to start a new project. Recently, I had a situation with a previous with the previous deal that the community was not trusting of the organization or the company that wanted to purchase the property, and it was a community property that they felt a tie to. And we reached out to the stakeholders and the local CDC for the area and other people in the community to see if we can start a conversation and find out what they would like to see in that space, and see how we could accommodate that and into the overall plan for the space that we were getting.
Okay, so just elaborate a little bit. How do you think that we should gain the trust? Like, how do you think that works? Can you spell that out for us?
I think the number one thing is having communication. Communication is key in everything in life, love, and business. So starting the conversation, at the very least, making sure that they feel and are heard in the process. If you can't do something, you can't do it. That's, if something doesn't make financial sense, well, the whole reason you're doing something most of the time is because you want to make money doing it. When it comes to commercial real estate, if it doesn't make sense, you can't do it, but at least you put in the effort to talk to the community, ask the questions, have a town hall if need be, and find out what that community is looking for. That's can be my number one piece of advice, is always communicate and keep that line of communication open through the development process. That way you can continue to work with have a good relationship with the people you're going to be neighbors with.
I totally agree. Jackson, do you want to elaborate on that for us?
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree any more with what Austin said. I think the name of the game is transparency when working with the community. There's a lot of misinformation online, kind of sloppy reporting jobs are out there, and the community can read about that and kind of make up their mind as to what they think you're doing, but it's not always the case. And the best way to clear the air there is open lines of communication and transparency from the developer's front. So we really pride ourselves on working with the community and understanding what they want to see happen to certain spaces. And I think that goes a long way.
Okay, I think so too. I agree with you guys on that. Great answers. Okay, so Jackson and Paul, either one of you guys can kind of jump in. I want both of you guys to elaborate on this next question. How can companies truly differentiate themselves in how they communicate their development goals and result?
I'll hop on that, Austin. I think it kind of ties in with the last question. It's really transparency. Open up the lines of communication between the developer and the community to understand what they want to happen to a certain space. You can't just go out and just assume that you have the community's best interest in mind. Allowing them to have a platform and a voice to speak about what they want to see happen is probably the best way to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think Austin said it earlier and Jackson reiterated, it's all about communication. And I think having more straightforward, direct dialogue with the people that are most likely impacted by development. So looking at a radius around developments and hosting, small dialogues and conversations to begin to build trust. Often what I have found in my many years working in and around government is that people don't get upset about what you tell them. They get upset because, or they don't get upset about the decision you make. They get upset because they don't know how you made the decision. And so when you can explain how you make decisions, why you are going in this direction instead of the other direction, if you give them an opportunity to be able to give their feedback and see if they can see their feedback is at least heard and has a valid rationale for why it's not being done, then I think that begins to build the trust with the community. And I think developments are much better off when you have that type of dialogue.
I agree with both of you, well, all you guys actually, when you say that. So what I hear is that what we need is open line communication to the community when we start these developments to see if they're interested in what we're trying to bring to their community. And can we all agree on that? Or you guys think that's, how does that? Okay, I agree. Okay, so guess what? I got one for all of you guys. And don't all rush to answer this one at once, okay? So what is the most innovative development PR campaigns that your organization has championed, and have you seen or implemented by different organizations that you've seen? So what is the most innovative development PR campaign that you guys have seen?
So I'm not going to talk about a PR campaign, so I guess I'm shifting the question a little bit, but I'm just going to talk about a development where I know the community, it was a challenging development. It hadn't actually taken place, but yet some of you may know about the mound of dirt, the Crosstown Mound that's over near Crosstown. It's around Peach and I think Overton Park or Overton Crossing. So with that development, there was a group of community leaders that were looking to put a historic district in place because they wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to give more insight to the developer on what they wanted to see put in its place. From the developer perspective, and the reason I know so much about it is because I was working at HCD, and that was just earlier this year. But from the developer perspective, they were concerned about the administrative hurdle that an historic district presents, because they wanted to build multiple single family and multi-family structures, and each structure has to individually be approved if it's in a historic district. And so our division served as the moderator, and we brought those two parties together, and we had a series of conversations and dialogues that led to an agreement where the property would be brought into the historic district after 5 years from the approval of the district. So the developer has 5 years to get it built, but they heard from the community, and so they're submitting a library of what the designs will look like for the structure. But because of that dialogue and that straightforward communication, they were able to come to a middle ground where everybody got what they wanted. They might not have gotten it in the exact way that they wanted, but everybody got a little bit of what they wanted. And I thought that was just an impressive opportunity to see this community collaboration at work.
Austin?
Development in the sense of real estate, I can't right off the top of my head, I can't think of one in the Memphis area. But I can say, as far as development from a organization standpoint, the LGBT Real Estate Alliance, the innovative way we did things is we did a lot of videos, and we focused on. You'd have to understand the history behind how this organization came to exist to truly appreciate this. But it was 100% transparency all the time. And we made it about the member and not so much the organization. So it was everything about how the member is the core of the organization, and not so much that they owe something to national, is that we owe something to you as an individual local member. And that was, we grew our membership by, I think we're close to 2,000 now nationwide in less than a year. But we officially launched October 1st of last year, and we grew by 2,000 people in less than a year, and we have 46 chapters nationwide, and that is even including 7 states don't even have a chapter in them yet. So that was really exciting for us from a PR point of view, that we really did it right by focusing on the individual.
Jackson?
Yeah, happy to talk on that. And Austin, that growth is incredible. So congratulations. I can speak for LPI Memphis. Probably the most innovative PR campaign that we had was Overton Square. There was a national developer that owned majority of the land over there, and they wanted to scrape the buildings and build a grocery store. The community was up in arms about it, and there was a lot of resistance. Eventually they dropped those plans because the community banded together and kind of spoke up against it. And we were able to step in and purchase the properties at Overton Square. And then after we purchased the properties, it really goes back to that open line of communication that we were talking about earlier. It was all about community meetings, listening to the locals and hearing them out and what they want to see happen for the area. Overton Square was a thriving success in the 70s and early 80s, and that's where a lot of the baby boomers were, and they were hanging out back in the day, and then it died and was kind of dilapidated for a couple of decades. So after talking with the local community and the neighborhood, we understood. It took dozens of local conversation, in-person meetings, but we finally got an understanding of what the community wanted to see there, and we were able to deliver on it. And there are always going to be critics, even if you think you did everything perfectly. But I think the vast majority of the local neighborhood there around Overton Square is happy with the end result.
Good deal. Good deal. And thank you guys all for, your effort in making Memphis great. Austin, let me ask you something. Thinking about corporate and community partnerships, what has your strategy in bringing development firms closer to local community leaders or micro influencers?
So, great question. Luckily for us in the Memphis market, we're a big small town, so just about everybody knows everybody. So fortunately, when we have a national developer come in, it's really easy to get them paired up with a local architect or a local project manager or local engineering firm that good chance they've either worked together, they know each other, and they know the city council or whomever they need to speak to at a government level to get things done and to do things the correct way. So my strategy is to, whenever I talk to developers or even residential investors, is to make sure that they understand that Memphis is a built by Memphis type of city, and we like to have our voices heard when it comes to what's going on in our town. And if you start tearing down old houses in Valentine Evergreen or Cooper Young, it's not going to end well. Same thing with big development, commercial developments is the same way. When you start talking about tearing down big old historic buildings, it's not going to end well in the long term, and you might make a few enemies in the process. So it's my strategy and my goal is to always pair up even local investors or national investors with local people to make sure that everything runs relatively smoothly as it can, and everyone walks away from the table feeling like they were heard and had a piece of the pie.
That was heartfelt. Jackson, how can you elaborate on that issue?
Yeah, I can just speak to a specific example. So we are building 370 apartment units on Broad Avenue, and we have partnered with a national developer that builds these apartment communities across the entire country. They are Grub Properties out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and when they came to town, they didn't have any of those relationships. And like Austin spoke to, this is a kind of a big, small town, so everybody knows everybody. So what we were able to do was really connect Grub Properties and their marketing team with the Broad Avenue Arts District, and all of the individual shop owners there had a say in it. We blasted off an email thread to a couple hundred of the local neighbors just to make sure that they knew that their voices would be heard, and if they had any complaints or comments or criticism, that they could direct it towards us and we would answer it promptly. So I think connecting the national developer with the local boots on the ground was extremely important. And as a result of that, the product that they build is really going to be so much more tailored to our local community than what they were previously planning on building.
So Paul, what do you think? What's some great strategies bringing development firms together for you? We can't hear you, Paul.
It's not a Zoom call until somebody talks. So I'm gonna talk about it from the opposite perspective. I think obviously it's great to have developers to go and meet the various community members, but I also think it's important for the community to be able to make their voices heard in advance of the development coming to their community. So I think having community members engaged in planning discussions, so plans like behind me, Memphis 3.0, you see the Memphis 3.0 plan right behind me, but the whole premise of Memphis 3.0 is to give the development community more certainty with regards to what the community wants to see. And so it's important that the community participates in these discussions, because that planning document is the document that developers are going to use to say, oh, this is what the community wants, because it's been certified by a government agency that has approved this plan. And so I think it's really important to continue to engage citizens in that process, or residents rather, regardless of what their citizenship status is, residents in the community in that process, so that they can have a say in what's coming to their community, because ultimately the zoning laws and the zoning atlas that approves what uses can go in an area is based upon that community feedback from a land plan. So while it sounds kind of hokey and government-y stuff, but it really leads to a direct change in a neighborhood.
I agree. So how do you think that the community could give more feedback to you guys so you can communicate this to the developers? And, either one of you guys can speak on it. Austin?
I want to chime in on this real quick, because there are a few members of the community at large that I have a firm belief that you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. So getting out I believe that, you pull everybody together, sit them down and say, okay, let's look, we want it this way, you want it that way. Let's see if we can come to a agreement and move forward. That way we do what's best for the city and for our community, instead of getting on Facebook, Instagram, or whatever, and just spitting vinegar or viper at whomever's trying to do something, instead of actually getting the problem solved. That is one thing. As the community, I think going about it the correct way is going to get the problem solved a lot faster and a lot easier and a lot less stressful for everyone involved, if it's handled in a way that is tangible.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to elaborate on how we can get the community to talk up more?
I think it's important for what you typically have when you have in communities in general is you have some people that are more vocal than others, and usually the ones that are most vocal are the ones that are mad. And so I think it's important to find opportunities to get diverse voices into the communication, even when there's not like one of those issues where everybody's inflamed and enraged and storming the council meetings and things of that nature, because the everyday projects are the ones that are going to most impact people's quality
Right.
of life. And so if they can engage in those discussions, and you need organizations like ours, Downtown Memphis Commission, we need to continue to have open dialogue with the residents downtown and with the community at large on what projects are coming, what's on the table. We have the Build Downtown plan that was built in parallel with the Memphis 3.0 plan, in which we had a number of those discussions around what types of developments we want to see downtown. And so I think it's an ongoing process. Citizens have to demand from their government leaders, whether they're elected officials or administrators, they have to demand from us that we keep open lines of communication with them as well, because that in turn influences the development community.
Okay, and this one is just off the record. So do you guys, any of you guys, do you suggest that we reach out to the developers on what we need, or we go out and find the developers what we need for Memphis to build this community and, come together and transform as one?
I would say yes, and I would also say, I believe that knowledge is power. And so if you are a lay citizen who just wants to see things in their community, it's important to understand what are the things that make people say no, so that you can already have in mind an answer to the no. And I used to always encourage people of this when I talk to community leaders in various neighborhoods that want to see something like a grocery store come into their neighborhood. Why can't we have this? And I would explain some of the margins on grocery stores and what type of space they would need in order to make a grocery store work. And so I wasn't saying that to discourage them. I was trying to inform them so that the next time we had the conversation, we can be talking about it in a more tangible way, and they can come with some rebuttals to why things don't happen in their communities.
Okay, so Paul, let me ask you this. What advice would you give the other firms and investors that are thinking about effectively engaging as they start new development projects?
I would say find the leaders in the community and start the dialogue as early as possible. Because once you open the door and you talk to them before there's any strife or issues, it makes the communication and trust much easier when you get further down the line.
Okay, and Jackson, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with what Paul was saying. And honestly, I think a lot of the onus is on the developer. From the resident's point of view, there's not much transparency when you hear about a development project. There aren't many people that are just going to pick up the phone and call the developer and ask them questions. So I think a lot of the responsibility falls on the developer to reach out and initiate those conversations and create the dialogue. And without a developer reaching out, the residents are kind of clueless on how their voice could be heard. So by developers reaching out and opening up lines of communication and creating the dialogue and starting the conversation, that goes a long way. And it also helps tailor your product to what the locals want.
Okay, Austin?
I'm going to piggyback off what Jackson said. I would say that in large part, the community feels powerless to the larger powers that be when it comes to development in the city and in their neighborhood. For a very long time in Memphis, it was, whoever had the most money got what they wanted. And I like to believe that that's changing and has changed to a large degree. And so now I agree, it's absolutely the responsibility of the developer. I mean, the neighborhood can try to reach out, but it's more likely that the developer is going to have an easier time reaching the community than the community is going to be reaching the developer, I believe.
Okay. And before we go into our Q&A with our audience, is it anything that you guys want to elaborate on the questions, or any feedback or anything that you want to give the community to help you guys and help us come together more? Is there anything that you guys want to add to that?
No, I'm interested to hear what all the questions, what questions will come from the community.
All right, well, what we're gonna do, we're gonna take a minute, we're gonna get into some of these Q&As, and let's see what we have. I think I saw one that it popped up. I think I'm having a couple of issues here. All right, guys. The question is from Tara. She's with Crye-Leike. She says, what are some reoccurring opportunities available for the residents to get involved and learn more about development in the city?
I can say one is to pay attention or get on the mailing list for planning and development. This is Memphis and Shelby County Division of Planning and Development. They send out notices when new projects are being proposed, or when they're asking for zoning permits or special use permits and things of that nature. So oftentimes you can get a heads up on that. And organizations like Urban Land Institute, they're always engaging the community in what's coming, what's new, best development practices, locally and nationally. So I think those are two good opportunities to stay engaged.
And I'll piggyback off Paul there. Another great resource is attending the meetings in person. You can go to the planning and development meetings, you can go to the land use control board meetings and really learn about what variances people are requesting, what's happening in your local community. And that's the best way to stay engaged. I think you start by getting on the planning and development's email blast list, and that way you can see all the projects that have been submitted. And then if you want to take it a step further, you can go to the meetings in person, either through planning and development or land use control board.
You're muted. CeCe, you're muted.
Paul touched me. Now I was contagious with the mute virus, okay? Tara said, thank you. Can you tell them how they can get on the mailing list?
I would suspect you could just go to the website, and I don't know the address by heart. I think it's
develop901.com.
Develop 901. I was going to say planning 901. Develop901.com.
I'm there every day, so.
There you go.
Okay. Let's see. I don't have any more questions coming in unless I'm not logging into our Q&A.
I see.
All right.
There are 3 in the Q&A now.
So this is an anonymous question. You guys feel free. Can you still hear me? It seemed like the volume went down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is an anonymous question. So it says, with minority-owned business, how are you working to increase minority partnerships in new projects?
I can speak to it because it's something that we directly impact as Downtown Memphis Commission. So with minority participation, a lot of times when you hear it talked about, specifically in government context, we're usually talking about construction contracts. So a developer has a big project, they're going to spend $1 million, and we say, well, at least 25% of this must be spent with minority businesses, and 250,000 gets spent with minority businesses in that space. One of the things that we've been pushing on now is saying, all right, that's good, and we should continue to do that, and we want to see those numbers be able to go up. But we also need to think about the developer side of the equation. And this is where it gets a little bit trickier, because obviously the developer has to bring money to the table. You have to be, in order to get in the game, you got to have some some cash to be able to participate in the deal. But what we've been saying is, yes, we do understand that, but we would like for the developers to go through some extra efforts to identify minorities that can invest in the deal with them, so that when this property is ultimately sold, or because there's a developer fee that's paid out, but there's also cash that's made on the deal when you actually sell the development. We want to see those type of economic returns be able to be participated in by minorities as well, because we know we have a 70% Black population in the city. And if we're ever going to really truly address the poverty issues that we have, we got to start building generational wealth. And we're starting to see, just having the conversation. Now, I will say we don't have it figured out, because like I said, you have this hurdle of having cash to put in the deal on the front end. But we are starting to see more developers come to us with more diverse development teams, just by virtue of having the conversation and pushing that. And so we're going to continue to push the needle on that work.
Okay. What do you think, Jackson?
Piggybacking off what Paul said, I think on the construction front, what the DMC and EDGE set up and the MWBE building requirements, that's huge. That really gets minority and women-owned businesses a lot of their revenue. But on the development front, I agree with Paul. I think we have a long way to go in terms of building generational wealth for minorities. You gotta be able to put some money up on the front end, and it's kind of like a chicken and the egg a little bit. How does a minority that's born into poverty get the money to invest in a real estate deal? A lot of times it's through successful real estate deals, but how do you get involved in the first one? It's tricky. I think having diverse development teams is incredibly important, and making sure that the community as a whole is represented with whoever is doing the development. So I think, not to just continue to repeat Paul, but I think we got a lot of work to do on that front. But it does seem like in the past decade or so, there are a lot more minority developers on the scene than there were just 10, 15 years ago. So that's positive.
Okay. I do have another question. It's is there a portal for the minority business owners to use to register their identity and specialty and skill set to easily be identified by developers? So I guess they're saying, is there some type of portal, or can we even create a portal where we can pitch the ideas as minorities to developers to pick up on?
So I know there's a portal for registering as a minority business, and I need to find the address. I'll find it as we're having this discussion and type it in the chat. But there is a portal. Now, I don't think that portal is typically used so that developers or businesses, because it's not just for developers, but developers or businesses that are looking for minority firms and vendors that can provide a service can search that portal by area of expertise. So if they're looking for a developer, or if they're looking for legal services, architectural services, cleaning services, catering, all of those types of businesses are in this portal. I'll find it while we're talking.
Okay. Is that just for Memphis, like Shelby County?
Yes, it's a Shelby County thing.
Okay. We're still in Q&A, audience. If you have any questions for us, and if I see some people are just logging on. We have Paul Young, President and CEO with Downtown Commission. We have Jackson Loeb with LPI. We also have Austin Rowe here. He's a realtor, and he has Rowe brokerage that he's just recently opened up. So feel free to type in your questions. We will get those answered for you. It is actually a great honor to be on this panel with you guys today and hear some of these things that we're trying to do in Memphis to make Memphis better. I actually have another question that just came in. This is from Tina. She's a realtor. I think she's with Keller Williams. She's actually saying something about implementing phases for development? Is there support to help manage and ensure success that is solely responsible of the contractor and the firm? How heavy is that weight on?
So I'll jump in quickly on that. I think she's talking about sustainability and how is
She
that
is.
implemented into those phases of development. And I can say for us, if you are coming to us for an incentive, we certainly weigh heavily sustainability factors and environmental practices to make sure that the developer is using those practices so they get additional points in terms of how many years they can have a tax abatement. So it is certainly important to us, and I'll let Jackson and Austin speak to it from an implementation side.
Yeah, I think sustainability is incredibly important, not just from the incentives that you're given through local communities for building sustainable buildings, but also the utility costs of operating the building after it's been developed and the long-term sustainability, for lack of a better word, the long-term sustainability of the building and how long it's going to be able to operate and be self-sufficient. It's all incredibly important, and it is directly related to the bottom line and how much income you're able to produce from a property. And nowadays, if you're not building a sustainable building, it's hard to sell it. So it's incredibly important.
Great answer, guys. Look like someone's trying to type in another question. How are we working, Paul, with the link for the portal?
And I'm struggling trying to find it. But I know we have the one for downtown Memphis because we have a separate one. I'm gonna put that one in the chat. But I was trying to find a broader one.
Okay, this is also a question, it's anonymous. Where do you see Memphis development going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Austin, I saw you raise your hand.
Sure. So right now, there's a big focus on moving back to the city core, and this is not just Memphis, this is nationwide. And COVID kind of pushed that, like put it into overdrive in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and not the least of which it costs about a third of what it would cost to live in LA. But you can make the same salary when your job goes full-time virtual. The other reason is that we don't necessarily, with the advent of delivery services and everything else, you can live downtown and not have to worry about having to drive to a grocery store and have groceries delivered to you. And so people are moving back into the city core because they want to be convenient to their entertainment. They want to be convenient to, fortunately for us, a lot of businesses are bringing their business back downtown. So it's more convenient to live in the midtown, or what we call within the parkways or within the loop. It's more convenient. So I think as far as Memphis specific is concerned, we're going to see a lot more density building within the parkways and within the loop, as the 240 loop as a whole. Specifically in the next 5 years, I would expect within the parkways, both north and south, to be renovated or see a significant change in the next 5 years, from at least at the very least from a residential standpoint, and more than likely commercial will not far behind it.
What do you think, Jackson?
Yeah, I think for so many years, the model here in Memphis, we kind of have the I formation starting at Poplar at the river to the west, and then it just goes east, and everybody, with the reliance on cars after World War II or whatever, the suburban neighborhoods were really booming around Memphis. A lot of people were okay with driving into the city to go to work. And nowadays it seems like, as Austin alluded to, the national trend is to be close to your work and less reliance on cars. So urban infill is going to be a big focus over the next decade. I think there's a lot of work that still has yet to be done inside of the 240 loop here in Memphis. We've gotten incredible traction over the past 15, 20 years in terms of developing Midtown. Downtown's had a lot of great new development as well, and I think that's just going to continue over the next decade.
Paul, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I would agree. Everything that they said. I mean, people are beginning to want to return to the core of the city, which is a really exciting thing to see happen. There was a real cool map that was done as a part of the Memphis 3.0 process. And what the map illustrated was based on existing trends. And remember, this was 2016, 17, 2017, 18, when they were doing this work. But the map showed that if we didn't do anything and we never really put together a plan or came together with a strategy as a community of how we want to grow, then development would happen along the Poplar corridor. And the closer you get to downtown, it's almost like an ice cream cone. The closer you get to downtown, the cone begins to narrow in terms of the band where development would happen. And the further you go east, the band was broader. But what we're starting to see is that by focusing on some of these areas outside of that cone, and that cone is still very important because the Poplar corridor is probably where some of our strongest property values are. But focusing on areas that are outside of that cone, so just south of downtown, just north of downtown, Whitehaven, Fraser, Raleigh, by supporting those communities, we begin to build a community where we have diverse housing types. Sometimes people move to the outer parts of the community, not because they don't want to live in the heart of Memphis, but because they literally can't find the house that they want in the heart of the city. They want a garage, they want granny candy, there are certain amenities. And so we're starting to build up various neighborhoods in our city where you can find those same types of amenities by having things like Jackson talked about Overton Square, mixed use developments. Those are the types of things that make communities vibrancy, promoting walkability. Those are the types of places that people want to start to move to. And I think you're going to start seeing more and more of that in the city. We're already seeing it. And I think you'll continue to see that over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, we have a few more questions that popped up. We got some good time here. This person says, large developments usually require partnerships that can meet certain qualifications and work scale. Many minority companies do not meet the baseline. How or are there resources to assist minority business to fill those gaps?
Yeah, definitely. And so the link that I did find, this one I just put in there, went to the Office of Business Diversity and Compliance. And through that network, they work with groups like Memphis Area Minority Contractors Association. And so they work with companies that are minority contractors that are looking to get into the development side. You have groups like Startco and Epicenter that are working with minority business on other types of businesses that they may want to take to scale. There's the 800 initiative, which is another program where they're looking to take 800 Black businesses, because many of our African-American businesses in the city, they have one employee. And so usually that's just like one person that's doing some work on their own. But we want to take those businesses to scale. How can they hire 4 employees? What impact would that have if 800 of them did that in our community? And so there are various initiatives, and they are all linked, and you have to do some digging a little bit, but they're all linked to the one that I just put in the chat with business diversity and compliance.
Okay. Anyone else want to elaborate on that? All right. This one says, how are minority business able to connect and be coached up to qualify to position themselves for some opportunities available through Pilot and Edge? And whoever, I guess, Paul, you can let the audience know what Edge and Pilot is if they're not familiar with those programs.
All right, sorry, I'm just reading the question one more time. How can they be coached up to meet qualifications? I think they would have to just reach out and let us know what project, and just to give everybody a sense of what that means. Edge is the economic development growth engine. And so they provide a lot of the types of programs that we provide at a broader scale in terms of geography. So they cover all of the city of Memphis, all of Shelby County, actually. And a pilot is essentially simply a tax abatement. Many of the large developments that you see in Shelby County have some form of a pilot for a period of years. And in order to position yourself, it's really is nuanced in terms of figuring out what to do. But first and foremost, you got to have property. You got to have the real estate under some form of control. And I think that's where a lot of times we have discussions. But if you don't control the real estate in which you're looking at doing the development by having an option on the land or have already secured the land, then it's really difficult to start going down the road of trying to figure out how to submit those types of applications. But once you control the land, then just reach out to us, and our team is certainly willing to work with you.
Jackson, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add, but I think you're taken a lot more seriously when you do have the land under control. You actually have the ability to execute at that point. So, and I think another big element of this is just creating relationships within the community and getting your name and brand out there, letting people know that you're available for work, and hopefully after your first opportunity, you do a good job. Word travels fast. It goes back to this being a big, small town. People hear about your success and want to work with you in the future. But as far as the first project, I think if you're doing it yourself, you need to have the land under control. And if you're contract for hire, then you need to have solid relationships with developers.
Okay. Tia says, in your opinion, how does Memphis compare to neighboring metropolis areas as far as growth?
Metropolis.
Austin, you want to?
Yeah, I think my opinion is that how we compare, if you want to compare as far as neighboring geographically, take Nashville, for example. Nashville grew at a rate that a lot of people in real estate land believe is unsustainable. And there's several other cities that grew that quickly, to a point where the people that lived there for years. Take Austin, for example. Austin, Texas. 6 years ago, I went there, and there was somebody telling me that they grew up in the neighborhood they lived there for 45 years, and now they simply can't afford it, and they can't afford the rent to live there anymore because it went up so fast over the course of 5 years that income wasn't able to keep up. And I'm actually kind of happy at the way Memphis grew, in a way that we grew in a way that was a little bit more sustainable for the community as a whole, and that goes beyond just economics. That goes to traffic, and any infrastructure and any number of other things. I mean, we don't have, the road situation can be a little bit better. I think we all can agree on that, but I think we grew at a rate that was a little bit slower, but it was manageable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's one of the things that I often say is, while we hadn't had the explosive growth that Nashville has had, I do think that it kind of works in our benefit. Like when Jackson was talking about the ability to preserve Overton Square. Like, how much of a travesty would that have been if we would have torn that down and built a fresh market or some grocery store? We have been able to preserve the character of our community, which I think will ultimately be one of our calling cards, because we have been able to preserve so many of our historic buildings and brings us character. So I think we compare well. I mean, obviously they've grown faster than us, so they have grown. They've grown more than us, but I think we are having more organic growth, which can reduce displacement and those issues that Austin was referencing.
I agree with that. And just to add on, we have had that steady Eddie growth. It's growing up, I always thought that our peer markets were kind of Nashville #1, maybe Atlanta. And as I've grown older, it's kind of sunken in that we're more of a tertiary market. Our peer markets are Birmingham, Louisville, those kind of markets. Nashville passed us in population, and they're going to continue to just boom, assuming they can keep getting high-paying jobs, relocating to the area. That's one of the biggest things that we're missing as a city is corporate relocations. And how do we incentivize high-paying employers to come to the area and create 500 to 1,000 jobs? It's through well-educated workforce and government incentives, most likely. But I think our steady growth is sustainable. And that's not to say that the boom that Nashville is experiencing is going to collapse at some point, but we need to be more focused on our true peer markets like a Birmingham.
I agree. So we got a few more minutes. And so one of the last questions is, how did you all get exposed to commercial real estate?
Mine is easy. I started off working in the housing and multifamily space, but I'm a planner. And so urban planner. So I've been kind of exposed to it, but now that I've been in this role and my prior role with housing and community development, I got a lot more exposure to it. So it's just been working as a planner for me.
You, Austin?
Mine, I mean, I was a realtor, and I worked primarily in residential real estate for about 3 years. And about 2 years ago, I got, I have a background in Memphis politics and urban politics. And so I got really interested in how the city grows and fell in love with the city all over again, and wanted to be a part of the change. And so I said, okay, let's learn as much as I can about commercial, and it never stops. You never stop learning. If you do, then if you say you know everything, you don't. That's what I did.
And Jackson?
Yeah, so I was kind of fortunate to grow up within a real estate family. So my dad and my uncle had a shop here in Memphis, and I was always exposed to the daily workings of what they had going on around the shop. I was the kid in the diapers running around bugging people, so I've kind of been exposed to it my entire life. But moreover, I really am passionate about real estate because Austin started to allude to it, but you have the ability to change communities, and you can see the direct impact that it makes on the community. So that was the major draw for me to get into real estate.
Well, that's good. Well, that's our time today, guys. And I want to thank everyone for joining us on this virtual discussion. I think we answered some key points, and we'll get those questions and links to you guys later on 3i Creative Communication on their Instagram page. We'll have those for you. Thank you guys for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.